Schismetrics kid. There was this whole culture of people, and they didn't call them drones back then in the 80s, but they had these little robots flying around them, recording them all the time. That's what you need. You get like a little drone, right? And it just sits there, and it'll record everything here.
Oh, I'm all into it.
Yeah.
You know, I could have them all over this conference, recording conversations, and then I could have the robots write the stories.
Yeah.
There you go.
The robotstack.io.
RobotStack, the new Stack robot land, whatever. I like the robot idea, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, on that note, I'm Alex Williams of the new Stack here with my fine co-host, Donnie Berkholz, and Michael Cote.
The occasional co-host.
The occasional co-host, and our good friend, our data research lead in Bangalore, India, community manager extraordinaire, Atul Jha. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Alex. How about you?
I'm great. I'm good. So Atul did this research, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And he did it on the OpenStack Blueprints, looking at the Juno release. And did that because if you look at OpenStack and GitHub, there's something like 140 projects or something like that.
Right.
And so that's quite a lot. So we decided to focus on the Juno release and then looking at the blueprints. And he picked out some of the blueprints that he thought were most interesting. And so we posted the story this morning, and Atul, I thought he would be able to enlighten us on these new features, and perhaps we may have our own thoughts and perspectives about this fine thing they call OpenStack.
Yeah, so what exactly are blueprints, for those not in the know?
Let's go to Atul for that one. Atul, tell us what blueprints are.
So basically, blueprints are a certain set of tasks which has a goal for a release, which is directed to a particular release of OpenStack. So let me share the URL with you. So for example, is there a way I can share? Okay, there.
Yeah, you should be able to on your left side there. There's a presentation capability there. The green with the arrow.
Here in Paris, that means.
Yeah, just share the URL.
But in California land, if you
share
your screen.
Yeah. So if you see, like, this is the blueprint for the OpenStack compute, which is mapped for the Nova release of OpenStack.
You see the screen
if you
share
check this,
Atul, do you see the screen share there on the side there, the green?
Okay.
You see that?
There is. Yeah.
Okay. So just click on that and then start sharing what is on your desktop so you can show us what blueprints are.
Oh. Okay.
As the name would imply,
okay, sure.
They're like plans. What should be done?
Mm-hmm.
Requirements.
Exactly.
Implement this. Let's get a Hyper-V console log. That's of medium importance. Let's see. You got John Garbutt approving it. Excellent. Yeah. There was a drafter. One Alessandro Piloti.
Yeah, so
there's 140 of these blueprints.
Well, in GitHub there's 140 projects. I don't know how many blueprints. So why don't you explain what you did here and talk about what blueprints are first of all? Hello?
We should rename your podcast The Long Pause.
I know. No kidding. Very funny.
Or you could name it Pushing It to the Limit. Sometimes when you drive the car as fast as possible, the wheels fall off. But what, did you want to go slow?
That has kind of like a Flashdance sound to it.
Oh, Flashdance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's turn our chairs backwards.
Push it to the limit.
Yeah.
So, well, there he goes. There he goes. There's the big W. It's like the bat signal.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah.
We can hear you now, but we were just talking about that long pause.
Okay. So currently, OpenStack has 11 projects, which is called OpenStack Integrated Project. So what I did was in the story was went through the blueprints of each of these 11 projects and then came up with the overall analysis, like what all were implemented and what were the some of the interesting features that were implemented in all of these 11 projects, which forms the OpenStack Integrated Project.
Okay, so you guys can pull up the story yourself and take a look at it. So Atul essentially went through all these integrated projects and picked out ones that looked noteworthy to him.
And for the current release, you're sort of going over how many features were added.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Of course.
So
now I thought Apple did Swift. What's going on here?
Uh-oh. So why don't you take us through from Nova and start with that and talk about some of the findings you saw there and why you picked these four, for example.
Just give me a sec. I'll just open the story there.
So just for our listeners out there, he chose these 11 projects, and so they are in order: Nova, Glance, Swift, Horizon, Keystone, Neutron, Cinder, Telemetry, Heat, Trove, and Sahara.
Yeah, notable for having all of their vowels in place, so that's nice. And so when these features get blocked out, since you've looked over so many of them, Atul, like you feel like they're all of sort of equal size. That is, like, is a feature in Trove of equal amount of effort as a feature in Horizon, or do they vary greatly? Or do you think they scope them well? And the reason I would ask is, like, of course, one of the things you would want to do is be like, oh, look, Horizon has 57 new features, so there must be a lot going on there. But if all of those features are tiny, like, we should make that button blue, then maybe it's not worth putting too much weight on the volume of features that are there.
So what I've done is I have just taken Blueprint as a single point. So I have not considered the blueprint or a particular feature that got added in one particular project. If it is it has more value than another project, a new feature got added. So to answer your question, I mean I would rather add all these feature with the equal importance. I will not say that since it's a OpenStack Horizon, so it has 50 features. It means all those added 15 feature would be easier. I mean the easiest features. That's why it has 50 features.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't we just go through, start with Nova and work our way down.
So if you see in the Nova blueprint, it says they've implemented around 50 features, and some of these features are also vendor related features, like a feature that got added adding a driver for a particular third party vendor. For example, if you go there is a feature for implementing VMware hot plugin. Similarly, there are other vendors, there are some features added about them as well. But what my focus was when I was doing this was to go ahead and just check on the features which has more to do with the core OpenStack part of it, which is going to be make more add on to the overall OpenStack or Nova part of it. So it's right now what they have done is the new feature they have added, they've added multiple interface with the same network, which means now you can have more than 2 interfaces with the same network added. So it's it adds one additional feature for Nova to have networking in place. Similarly, what in the second feature, there is a Nova scheduler. It has got the whole code base for the whole Nova scheduler is getting out of Nova, and the new project called OpenStack Gantt is kind of coming up.
Why that, for example?
So basically they're trying to modularize as much as possible the overall core code of Nova, because Nova is like one of the initial core project of OpenStack, and because of that, like there's so many components already inside it. Like you have Nova scheduler, you still have Nova network, even though you have a separate Neutron project. So like those were some of the things which I found interesting. So like kind of I listed apart from all the 50 odd features which are there in the blueprint.
And then what do the different priorities mean? I mean, other than what they say, because it's interesting to look through the bar graphs. Like there's a lot of low and medium things that get taken care of.
Yes. So priority essentially means like the project technical lead along with the code developer, they decide like, okay, these features are must, it should go in the next release. So on that various level, I mean, on that particular level, they decide like, the priority of this particular feature, how important this feature has to like, to go with the newest release of OpenStack.
Right. And maybe there's not that many high and essential ones. There's a lot more low ones, right? There's not everything can be number one, so there's a limited number of things that are really must be done. And then you got to do something else with the rest of your time. Do all these low priority things, like change the button color.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm really curious about is so with these features and the different priorities, do they implement all of them, or do they just get to some of them for a certain release and then push the rest back to the next release? How does that work?
Come again, I would like. I'm not able to like kind of hear you. Your voice was not.
Okay, we'll repeat the question, Donnie.
Yeah. So, do they implement all of the blueprint features for a given release, or do they push some of them back to the next release? And how do they prioritize whether they finish a given blueprint for a given release?
Okay, so what happens is like right now, if like there is design summit happening along with the OpenStack summit. And design summit is where the core developers sit along with the project. So if you'll go to the design summit rooms, there'll be separate rooms for particular project. Like there'll be a Nova design room. So what happens is like that's the place where all these core developers, they sit, decide, and then they prioritize the features that needs to be kind of added. So if you'll go for a killer release, there would be. I mean, right now they're discussing about the killer release, the new release of OpenStack with the projects that are coming up. So it's more to do with like a whole bunch of like the core developers along with the developer of a particular project sitting together and deciding and then prioritizing like what particular feature should go where.
So they'll just prioritize the features and then they'll implement those.
Okay, and then the ones that they don't get to turn out to be more complex than they imagined, do they push them off to the next release, or do they push the release back so they can fit it in?
No. So actually, what happens like they have so this blueprint like the feature centric and related to one particular release. So what's happening here is like all the 50 particular blueprints which you have seen here, it's aimed for the release of OpenStack Juno. So there might be some ideas, but that might not get accepted because all the developer will not have a same, all the developers might not be on the same page to implement that particular feature. So that's why we have design summit where all these developers basically come, sit, propose about the new features and the feature that needs to be modified and all. So basically, it's an overall community effort. It's not that someone walks in randomly and says, "Hey, I will add this particular feature," and okay, fine, it's been implemented. There is a proper workflow where, like, if you want to add a new feature, then like all the developers they'll talk. I mean, there'll be a nice conversation like, why do you want to implement this, and what will be the advantage if it gets implemented? They work on it, and then this gets as a blueprint. It gets submitted, and then development on this particular blueprint takes place with a new release.
Makes sense.
Okay, well, let's move down then. On to Glance, which is the image repository of the OpenStack project. There doesn't seem to be much that was added in Glance. It doesn't seem like it's a very big project.
Reason what I feel for Glance is like Glance is just like the image repository, and the code when it came like in the initial days itself, it had like most of the features that were needed, and I mean that is one of the reasons why I don't see a lot of things happening around Glance in this release of OpenStack. Like some of the interesting, out of the 5 features, I mean that are added, like I've just listed only some of it, like which like
metadata. People just want to add more text to images. Nothing fancy.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and the policy one is interesting because I was just, we were in this analyst day yesterday and they were talking about adding policy to Swift as well. And so it seems like, as OpenStack is maturing, they're adding more of these enterprise-grade features, saying, like, hey, it would be great if we had some security and some control.
I'm not able to hear you guys.
Mute, darn it. That's why.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Now I'm.
Boy.
I don't know what.
Real professionals here.
Yeah, now you sound great.
Now I sound great, don't I? Now you can hear everything, can't you, Atul?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah.
Afterwards, I was going to say, Atul, how come you didn't reply? No, but so we're just talking about the Glance driver, the Glance project, and not a lot there, as you were saying. So why don't we move on to Swift, which is this is one of the biggies, isn't it? This is the object storage component of OpenStack. Tell us, which has been around for a long time. Is this fully baked? Really? I mean, because there's not really that many features here as well, are there?
No, they have implemented 50 new features, and some of it, like they have added the storage policy. They have also added like a parallel object auditor feature, which means like now you can have multiple auditors, which means the time taken for overall process, like the backend part of like the Swift is going to be faster. And they have also added the Keystone v3 API. So like, yeah, I mean, they have added some features which is related to the integrated projects around it, along with the storage policy. Like storage policy is a really big thing for Swift. I mean, I've been hearing it from past 6 or 8 months back about, the storage policy implementation and how Intel, Swift Stack, and other companies working on it.
And is there a blueprint for policies? To Donnie's
yes.
Policy seems like a common exciting thing. So is there sort of like a shared understanding of what policy means across these projects?
Yeah, so there is. I'll just share the blueprint for the same. So this is the blueprint which talks about the storage policy.
You can show
object storage.
We'll bring it up right here. There's the storage policies.
Oh yes.
What did you take from what was your takeaway from the storage policies feature?
So I mean, I find it interesting because it further subsets the hardware one can use. And at the same time it optimizes Swift for a better visibility.
So it sort of allows you to specify what type of hardware you want to run on, or like what gets expressed in a Swift policy?
So I mean, Swift policy can be of multiple levels, and one of it can be like the subset of hardware you want to use, or the data which is stored across the subsets and all those things.
So you could say like I want this data to only be stored in this country, or this data to only be stored on SSD drives versus like spinning disk or whatever. Like it sort of allows you to have more control over placement of data.
I mean, that's what I think the storage policy is. I mean, if I go through the storage policy blueprint of Swift, yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. What's the next integrated project here?
So Horizon is next, the OpenStack dashboard, and as Cote mentioned before, yeah, there are like a lot of movements happening here. Like there are around 50 odd implementation, the 50 new features got added to this project, and like one of the features that got added is like Sahara used to be a separate project. It was not an integrated project before. So Sahara is a Hadoop as a service project for OpenStack. So they had their own separate dashboard. Now the dashboard is integrated along with the OpenStack dashboard. So that is like one of the features which got added here in the OpenStack dashboard, like one of the interesting features.
So how do you define? So how do you define this integrated project again? How do you do that? How's that defined?
Okay, so I don't know the term integrated core, and I mean there are like so many terms which is going all out and in the like the whole OpenStack community, like what is OpenStack core, what is this and what is that. So basically integrated projects are, I mean in one line, integrated projects are the project which has blessings from everyone, from the PTL to OpenStack Foundation to OpenStack tech. I mean the whole OpenStack is like the whole OpenStack board has like so many levels. Technical, apart from the project technical lead, it goes to okay, I'm not able to explain the real. I mean the all levels.
These are projects that have the full support of the of the developer group. Do the developers at the design summit?
At the foundation.
Okay.
They've graduated from the incubation phase.
Yes.
Apache term.
Yes.
Right. They filled out all the right paperwork and taken it to the correct offices, waited in line, and now they're good to go.
So what is the procedure for that? So to get that blessing, do they have to go to the cardinals, or what is this hierarchy inside inside the organization so it gets that proper blessing?
I think I can do a small review on that actually. Like
what?
there is a I'd say like I can write a separate story on that. Like you have to basically apply for incubation, then like there is this technical committee members who you'll have to basically discuss with about your project, the scope of your project, how it is different, and then like after final understanding is made, then only the project graduates and becomes part of integrated project.
So the technical committees then are led by who, and how are they chosen?
Okay, so I don't have answer for that actually.
Okay, that's.
I'll have to look for that.
Do you guys happen to know?
No, not off the top of my head. I don't know the foundation process.
It gets into some interesting questions about the foundation itself. I think just generally.
Yeah, I mean, the technical committee is made up of all the PTLs, right?
The PTLs.
All the individual project leaders.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But in terms of how they're chosen, I think they're somehow elected in sort of an Apache-like style from within each project.
Mm-hmm.
But it would make a lot of sense to just check the internet versus my speculation.
Yeah, and as analysts, we've probably been force-fed this information many times, and we've retained it.
And because of the new stack, now you can process it.
That's right.
Or begin to, or we can do that later. Okay, so let's move on. But that is interesting. I think I wrote a story about the whole how OpenStack Foundation is structured, and to me, it's all like about the mark, the trademark, and how the trademark is controlled, and how it's managed through the different through the different parts of the whole foundation itself, down to the technical level and how and what actually gets implemented.
Yeah, I think it's this interesting conflict between open source software and the way we all use trademarks to enforce that without, open sourcing the trademark as well as, open sourcing the code in terms of copyright and patent. We said, no, trademark, we're not going to do open source there.
No.
And, in part because if you do that, you actually lose trademark protections. You
Right.
have to have a quality assurance over trademarks, otherwise you lose them.
Right.
And, Mozilla has done this very successfully with Firefox, where they used to have, like, weird customized versions of Firefox that would be built with spyware, and they would go buy Google Ads for them and show up on, like, the top downloads. You Google Firefox, get somebody else's download.
Yeah.
Just spyware and crap.
Yeah.
Or they would, say, hey, Firefox is only $30. You can download it here and buy it today. And it was a huge problem, and so they ended up having to say, look, we give away the code, maybe we can use this trademark thing to somehow enforce that they can't call it Firefox, or we can send our lawyers after them. It's not a problem with OpenStack, but it's a parallel, right?
Yeah, there's a definite parallel, because if you look at and you compare the OpenStack policies for its trademark in comparison to Cloud Foundry, there's some similarities there. There's some very much similarities in how Cloud Foundry is organizing itself as a foundation and very much follows this OpenStack model. Whereas Docker Docker, the company, controls the trademark, right? And so they are very much of an open source project, but you cannot put your name, you cannot put the Docker name on your if you develop something with the Docker technology. So there's always these efforts to control.
Yeah.
I remember there were like 2 years in the Java world where like all everyone talked about was IP issues. It was an exciting time where lots of good innovation happened. but it was necessary to kind of go over the legal defensive maneuvers to, as Donnie says, right? Like you need some point of control because there's a bunch of rude people out there who will not respect your culture, if you will.
Yep, a bunch of rude people and a bunch of companies with money to make.
Yeah. But it is. I mean, I think most foundations like retain trademarks and companies, and that's basically one of their major enforcement mechanisms. And then also, to some extent, like in your Docker example, like a monetization path is like, well, this is the real name. It's like those $50 T-shirts, right? They've got brands all over them, and like you can always get a nice, comfortable T-shirt with no brand name on it. But if you want the mark, as it were, and that costs you the $50. I guess it's probably like what is that, like $40 premium maybe.
I think it's interesting to look at all the different kind of open source project foundations, and the trademarks and the policies they have. I think you find some nuggets there.
Sure.
So we have about 5-10 minutes left, Atul. Do you want to just take us through some of the other highlights you found? Maybe is there any particular integrated project that you'd like to look at, or 2 or 3 before we have to run?
Yeah, so for me, OpenStack Neutron, the networking part of OpenStack, is like one of the most populated project, because like there are so many vendors involved in it, and if you'll go and see the blueprints, you will find a lot many features that got added has to do with like vendor drivers, like if you'll go. So a lot of work is being pushed forward by the vendors from the company, apart from the making the whole OpenStack Neutron as a core as a most features. Like there are a lot of features that are
essentially make Neutron compatible with the gear and the products of the networking vendors.
Yeah, totally. So that tomorrow when they have to come up with a press release, they can say we are integrated with OpenStack Neutron as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, especially by volume of new features, it definitely seems an area of high activity. Like we were looking at Horizon, right, the UI layer, and you would expect that would always have a high volume of stuff because most of the features from other integrated projects would have not all of them, but many of them would have a UI component. So every time you add some new feature, you need some new thing in the UI. So that's sort of like always going to happen. But yeah, compared to what was it? Glance had like 5 features. Compared to that, there's obviously a lot of work going on in Neutron. And I remember this was like 6 months ago, but there was, as always, there was a register story that pulled it together. But it was sort of like a collective, sorry about that networking thing. I think there was a bunch of finger pointing between different vendors and cardinals, as you say, in the OpenStack world, complaining about networking. So it seems like a major area of fixing focus.
Yeah.
As per the latest, go ahead.
List of blueprints is all the low priority ones are the drivers.
Right.
It's like, what matters? Well, apparently not actually working on my hardware.
That's very Dilbert-esque, isn't it? Why are drivers a lower priority?
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's like you look through the list and it's like Arista, Brocade, Cisco, Juniper, pick your vendor, PlumGrid, all these low priority ones. And, apparently it's because there's so many that if they say, well, it doesn't work on my gear yet, well, go back to different gear, it works on 37 others.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas things like some of the high priority ones are like, high availability, reworking of some of the stuff that's more neutral, which is interesting to me because a lot of these PTLs, right, technical leads are from the vendors.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure they have to work very hard to stay vendor neutral.
Or they don't have to work harder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it might be kind of a pushback saying like, look, we're from a vendor, and so we're going to deprioritize all the vendor drivers because ours is already in.
Oh.
I mean, you could argue the opposite, right?
Yeah, we should ask around to people and see if there's a convention for, because it could also be a convention of like, well, if you're a vendor and you want to contribute a driver, I just said contribute, so just send us the code and we'll just look over it and check it in, which is sort of like I remember when we used to prioritize things, there's always a bad way, and I have no idea if this is how it goes, but there's one way of prioritizing things that's basically amount of suffering I want to put up with, right? And like, if it's low priority and someone's already given me the code, it's like, yeah, that's fine, whatever, we'll get it in. Whereas a high priority thing, like, there's more suffering associated with it. But it would maintain some nice diplomatic neutrality if there was convention that all drivers are always low priority, meaning that like someone else needs to write them and we'll focus on the common stuff. But yeah, it is sort of, to your point, sort of a little odd because you would assume making it work on lots of gear would be a high priority, but maybe there's some, HA also very important.
Right. I
hear.
Yeah, it's a challenge too, just in terms of balancing, all of that effort. I kind of forgot what I was going to say, but
it's no problem.
So here's what I was thinking is, so if you're just accepting code from vendors and throwing in your code base, it really, from a user point of view, gets confusing because they don't know what quality to expect.
Right.
You say like, oh, well, vendor A writes code that's actually kind of terrible. Vendor B writes really solid code. We're just going to throw it all in together. And then, depending on what gear you're using in a given part of your data center, you're going to have a very different OpenStack experience.
Yeah. And
so it comes back to the quality perception of the entire product based on, the individual code level contributions from all the vendors.
Oh, yeah. It's like the printer driver trap. There should be a better name for that. But have you ever noticed, like, printer software is always awful?
I just would live in abject fear of printer drivers.
And then over the course of maybe like 4 or 5 years for the people on Macs, like Preview has gotten pretty good at like scanning. But you remember Twain? Does that send shivers down your spine? TWAIN? There used to be this weird common protocol for doing scanning. Yeah, and there was always some strange software for the scanner, and it was always like it was a very weird experience. And then finally, at least I don't know how it is in Windows land, but if you're on a Mac, like maybe not in Yosemite, but a release one ago, you could like go into Preview, their PDF viewer Swiss Army knife of imagery tool, and like just click import from a scanner, and it would work.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's that abject fear that people have who are using OpenStack?
If they've scanned a lot of images.
With the driver hell that we've all known in printerland, is that as applicable to OpenStack?
Well, I'm sure it's going to be, right? Because as you make OpenStack more upgradable, you're going to start running into issues with driver incompatibilities across versions.
Yeah.
Especially as you try to modularize these things more and more, right? And like we were just talking yesterday about, they want to get to a point where they can ship Nova without all drivers, for example, and still call it an OpenStack distribution, just with the drivers that you actually need, because that's the hardware you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think you're inevitably going to end up at a point where you're you've got third-party drivers that are like standalone things that you want to plug in, and the versions aren't going to match up. You're going to have, you know, API incompatibilities there, which is going to be used back in exactly the same place.
And there's also a strange situation, like there was someone that Donnie and I saw talking yesterday, and they're like, oh, we run all of our storage on Fiber Channel with SANs and everything, so like we don't need all the commodity cloud stuff. Like we've got all that handled, which is, you know, it was the standard in their organization to run in comparative to sort of cloud storage, a much fancier way of doing things. And so of course they needed the drivers compatibility to make OpenStack work with that. And so there is a huge diversity of hardware out there to be supported, which gets you in an exciting driver state. But you know, that was like always arguably one of the powers of one of the powers of Windows was like drivers, like everything.
Yeah. Are
Maybe it was a horrific experience scanning, but at least you could scan, right? And you could plug in a mouse, and the mouse would probably work. And like drivers are, you know, if you sort of embrace the hellish nature of doing drivers, they're nice. They're like features. They enable, what do they used to call them? Peripherals, which are fun.
So speaking of, also there's a number of plugins that are a low priority. And what else? Agents. Yeah, there's be interesting to kind of do some text analysis of all the features, you know, across the different levels of priority for another day.
Yeah, what's the commonalities?
So, any conclusion? Any conclusion? Can I try to say this again?
Concluding.
Any concluding pearls of wisdom, Atul, that you may share with us about this overall project? Like, for example, what are some of the angles that you're seeing into other stories about OpenStack that you think need to be explored?
I mean, so vendors are definitely one core part of the overall entire OpenStack ecosystem. I mean, if you go to a Cinder project now, the blueprint for Cinder has around 5 to 10 different vendor plugins that got integrated with the OpenStack Juno release. So that is one part of it, and it's good. It's good for the overall ecosystem of OpenStack. Like, you know, the project will have more acceptance if more and more vendors are pitching in and, you know, making the project a success. Like, apart from that, I also see a few small companies, like, you know, they are contributing upstream. Like, there's a German company called B1 Systems. There is a company called Trocera. They are like one of the leading contributor for OpenStack database as a service project, the Trope project. And they have like 2 to 5 members who are contributing to the project. So like, yeah, things are going really good. But yeah, as we said, like, there are a lot of thing which needs to be, I mean, which needs to be done, like, to make the overall project much awesome, more better. And like, everyone is working on it. And related to the technical committee and the project technical lead, how OpenStack is different from others is, like, you know, they have a complete democratic approach of kind of putting a leader. So like, even for PTL, there is an election which happens where all the developers, those who have committed a patch in the project, they basically get chance to vote. It's similar to OpenStack. I mean, it's the same with OpenStack technical committee as well. So basically, you have to first nominate yourself. Then people who are contributed to the project get chance to vote, and then you get selected.
Okay. Any thoughts, you guys, on OpenStack as we conclude here, based on what Atul has brought to us and kind of your own insights that you gathered over these past few days?
No, I mean, you know, they're obviously doing a lot of work.
Well, it seems like they have to do a lot. It seems like they have to do a lot of work considering the complexities in OpenStack.
Yeah. No, I think. I mean, to say something only slightly more useful, like, yeah. I mean, there's no stopping momentum around things, right? Like, that's things haven't leveled off at all. Like, there's been a lot of actual end users and things like that paraded in front of us analysts, and yeah, they have most of the discussions with the end users. I think most of them were like under NDA or whatever, which is fine. But they were all pretty. The path that they seemed to follow was like we had a new project that needed a cloud-like infrastructure layer, and for some reason we chose some insane timeline to work on it because why not, I guess. And we were able to do it. And it was for this one type of project that we had. And now that we've gotten that under our belt, we're thinking more and more about moving how we would move the rest of our IT and have it spread out, like to run on OpenStack, if you will. Yeah, we're fiddling around with that. And so it seems like in the enterprise space, and there was a bit of what you might call service provider or .com people doing it, but there's probably more. There's probably several handfuls worth of people who have had. Usually it was like Havana or like just one or two releases ago of having OpenStack in a production environment. And you know, you could see they had awards for the various types of uses, whether it was like the guy keynoting from BMW using it, or like helping pets find a safe home, or things like that. But things that were you know, real workloads, if you will. And I think the other characteristic was like when in these conversations with end users, they would most all of them had VMware, and that was pretty much what their legacy thing was. They wouldn't even call it legacy. That was what their existing infrastructure was running on. And so there's always this question of like how these two things will coexist or replace one or the other. But it was interesting to get some pretty deep profiles of what the portfolio is running in various shops of where OpenStack is.
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing that stood out to me in the same kind of conversations with the users was a lot of them were noticing that OpenStack was getting more complex, more enterprisey, and so they were starting to take advantage of the API to write their own minimal replacements for what they actually needed.
Right.
Which was like, wow, okay, so OpenStack is now getting to be the enterprisey solution in some cases, right? It's getting to be so complex because they're adding all these drivers, all these features. You know, I mean, if you're adding 50 features, like good-sized features, every release, every component, it's going to add up, and it's going to get complex, and you know, it's hard to keep up with the documentation and keep the setup simple enough that, you know, end users who aren't developers of the product can grasp how to set it up, how to configure it, what it's capable of. And so they end up saying, like, look, I don't need all of that crap in authentication. I just need to integrate with LDAP and be done. You know, just let me hack an API together that can do that.
So Atul, you were mentioning to me earlier that they are going to not support prior releases up to what?
So if you see the OpenStack, let me give you. So the release cycle of OpenStack, if you see, it has an end of day kind of. So right now after Havana, the other projects like there have. I mean, I'm just looking for that particular URL, which basically shows the release cycle, and it tells you about like what all versions of OpenStack are now end of life. So projects from Havana are basically end of life right now. Let me share the URL with you guys to give you a.
Well, in any case, it seems like what they're doing here is they're trying to reduce some of the complexities so they don't have to like support some of those older versions as much, which seems to be this whole issue of rolling versions is kind of like a primary one right now. And I was hearing people say last night how difficult it was to kind of try to sell OpenStack, because they would go in and they'd say, hey, let me sell you OpenStack, and then the customer would say, yeah, I'll buy that, but they say, oh, well, the next release is coming out in a month, I'll wait for that instead.
Oh.
You know,
they call that the Osborne effect.
What's the Osborne effect?
You remember that book I read that talked about this? Not that I lived through it. But like there was in the 80s there was Osborne computing, and they had the Osborne Giga Awesome whatever, and then it was of course named after the founder, as you did back then. And so the Osborne guy came out one year and he was like, well, we've got the awesome computer now, but next year we're going to release an even better computer that's going to be it's priced cheaper. So basically there were no sales for a year. And that's what's known as the Osborne effect. People are always very cautious about telling you, especially in the consumer space, like what's coming next, because it basically tanks your sales as people wait for that. so similarly, whether that's a sales-oriented way of doing it, but similarly, right? Like if you were thinking of installing software, you might just wait until the next version of it, which is probably advisable, right? Like you don't want to be the person who buys the iPhone 5S like a week before the big Apple announcement that the iPhone 6 comes out, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna wait. So there you go.
Okay.
With rotten bananas on the side to make bread with. Get the new ones. I want to buy the old bananas.
And
I did see some space basically where people are like discussing about the long-term release for OpenStack. So they are like not very happy. Like the some of the career providers, like the 6-month cycle is like very painful. I mean, even the tweet from like one of the keynote said something similar. Like we don't like this 6-month release cycle because we have to spend a lot of time in upgrading to the newer release. So
right.
I'm not sure like what happened. Like what foundation?
Yeah, I mean, there's like there's like 3 masters OpenStack seems to serve now as an end product. There's service providers or cloud providers like Rackspace and others who want to run it on their own, who probably do want the latest code just to get fixes and things like that. And then there's enterprises who like 6 months is very fast, right? Like and they would rather have stability over like a bunch of new features. And then apparently there's a bunch of like carrier gear people with all their NFV and things like that who like are looking towards something like OpenStack to be like the new loopy layer of infrastructure software that runs all of their stuff. Instead of having dedicated boxes, they want to virtualize all of their telecom features. And from what those guys are saying, they want to move quickly. But I think their idea of quickly would be kind of a lot like the enterprise idea of quickly, right? Because what they're used to do is, as someone said, is like put a box on a truck and ship it to somewhere when you need to replace it. Versus like, why don't we just go over the network and install some software on the box? And so there, it'll be interesting to see what speed means to those different participants. Right?
The speed question becomes an interesting.
Yeah, like is 6 months a long time or a short time? Like someone in the keynotes yesterday was talking about it was the Time Warner person who was talking. He said it only took us 6 months to do this. It was awesome. And then of course like the chiming in from Unicorn Land, Adrian Krakoff was like 6 months is absurd. The speed is what you want to focus on. But I think for someone like Time Warner, 6 months was phenomenal. And they also have like they have their summer holidays to get to, their real lives, not just their life of technology.
No. We're almost done. Sure, we're done. Well, that should conclude our show for now. And so I'm Alex Williams, the new Stack, here with Michael Cote and Donnie Berkholz, along with Atul Jha in Bangalore, India. Thank you very much for participating, and we'll be back again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.